Om Shri Gurubhyo Namah Harihi Om Dhyayamo Dhavalavagunthanavatim Tejomayim Naishthiki Snigdhapangavilokinim Bhagavatim Mandasmita Shri Mukhim Vatsalyamritavarshiniim Sumadhuram Sankirtanalapiniim Shyamangim Madhusikta Suktim Amritanandatmikam Ishwarim. Om Amriteshwaryai Namah. Om Amriteshwaryai Namah. Om Amriteshwaryai Namah. Om Amriteshwaryai Namah. Being a Friday, let us continue our discussion on Bhaja Govindam. We discussed verses 1 through 14. The last week we discussed the verses for 13 and 14. So as always, let's first recap on all the points that we have discussed, the gist of every verse that we have discussed till now, so that we get the context with which we move on to the 15th verse today. So the very first verse was about going beyond the so-called grammar and technicalities of life that we create, we complicate life. 2, to go beyond greed, to accumulate wealth. 3, to go beyond the unnecessary attraction or obsession we may have towards bodily or the physical appearance, the bodily appearance that we have, the bodily beauty that we set focus on. 4th verse was about how life is unpredictable and we need to be prepared for whatever surprise life throws at us. 5th verse was about how people would love us, follow us, we would have following and support of people as long as we have wealth and abilities. Once they depreciate, it's natural that the amount of following that we have is going to go down. The 6th verse was about how unless and until we have life in the body, people, give importance to us. Then it is very natural that people will forget about us. 6th verse was about that. The 7th verse was about every stage of life, how we are obsessed with different things. Childhood, we are obsessed with toys. Young age, we are obsessed with relationship. Old age, we are obsessed with our problems and worries. Never do we invest time on obsessing on the true, the ultimate truth, the supreme reality. 8th verse was about, again, the limitation of relationships and to raise the question within us, who am I? To ask us that question and try to find an answer to that. The 9th verse was about, given all these shortcomings, where do we begin our spiritual growth? And the sequence was begin with good company. Through good company, try to develop the right attitude of detachment, and through detachment, move on to going beyond the delusions that we have. Through that, we will reach the ultimate state wherein the supreme truth would be revealed to us. The 10th verse was about how the different things that we hold significant at some other point of time, at a later time, they will no more be significant. So always try to understand that impermanence. The 11th verse was about how we unnecessarily take pride in these things that are impermanent. So think twice before taking pride in something that is meaningless. The 12th verse was about how life, the experiences that we have in life are dual in nature. We get one kind of experience followed by another kind of experience, and it keeps swinging between the good and bad, the dual nature. So try to understand that and not get carried away by the emotions of every situation. The 13th verse was about, which we discussed the last session, 13th and 14th. 13th, again stressing on good company, how good company is so significant in our life. Good company is what would take us across the ocean of samsara. And we stressed on good company at the level of people that we associate with, and more importantly, good company, the association that we have with a realized master, Sadguru. And the 14th verse was about how we're talking about our spiritual growth. The outwardly show off growth has no much significance. What is most important is the inward growth, the spiritual growth that we have inside, within. And an outward growth which is a result of the inward growth, that outward growth is very meaningful and acceptable. Rather, just showing off outwardly should be avoided. So these were the verses we have discussed so far, and then we move on to the 15th and the 16th verse that we discussed today, which is focusing on desires. And we have discussed quite a bit about it during the Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 discussion. Anyway, we'll move on to that. Before we move on, the last session that we had, I forgot to discuss the question that one of you had posed from the 12th verse, the week before the last, the session before the last session that we had, wherein we had discussed about how we lose track of the bigger picture. We are so obsessed about our specific desires, our specific motives, etc. So the question that was put forth, I'm just reading out the question. Please elaborate when convenient on your wonderful teaching last Friday. You were talking about the mind. We seem to lose the main point and always stick to our own agenda. Why is that? Why does the mind miss the big picture? Biology? Conditioning? Is it stuck? Is it trapped? Anyhow, if you have time to address this issue, it would be helpful to me. This was the question put forth by one of you. I think you have answered the question in your question. Why is mind not ready to bring in the big picture, rather stick to one's own agenda? The answer is verily that. Mind always wants to stick to one's own agenda. That's the reason why it is not able to see the big picture. As part of the creation, it is very natural that everything in the creation is always in search of the point of rest or the point of inertia. That's how the creation is created. Even science talks about how the whole balance in the creation is maintained because every object goes towards inertia. It tries to go towards the state of rest. Only when every object is trying to be in a state of rest will everything be normal. If everything keeps moving or everything is in state of unrest, the entropy goes up and there is imbalance created in the environment, in the creation as such. If you look at a swing, if we push this swing, it will keep going back and forth. But if we let go of it, let it be, automatically this swing will try to come to a point, the middle point, where it doesn't move. It's the very algorithm of creation, wherein everything tries to go to a state of rest, to a state of inertia. Or you have the bathroom sink, or a big bowl that you have, and you have a small ball or a ball bearing, and you try to put it in the bowl or put it in the sink. It will go round and round and round and round and round and round, and finally in the middle part of the sink, the bottom part of the sink, it will just go and rest, go to a state of rest. The ball is in the quest of finding that state of rest. Until then, it will keep moving. It will keep going around, round and round and round and round. So it is the very nature of creation, the very algorithm that everything should go or everything is in the quest of the state of rest, the state of inertia. Similarly, the mind is also such. Mind always wants to be in the state of least amount of agitation. And interestingly, the mind thinks the least amount of agitation is when my own desire is fulfilled. That's when I feel least agitated, is what the mind thinks. Interestingly, it's an oxymoron. That's the what's the term that we use? Oxymoron, right? You think this is what is right, but the exact opposite is what is right, what holds good. We think each time my desire is satisfied, I'll feel better. But another desire comes up, and again the mind becomes agitated. But so this state of vicious cycle is known as Maya. But anyway, the mind is designed in such a way that it is finding a state of inertia, a state of rest. And a state of rest, according to the mind, is when my own agenda is achieved, my own desire is satisfied. So, for the mind, that is the priority. The mind thinks, for me to be in the state of inertia, my desire, my views, my agenda, my way of doing things has to be satisfied. And that's why the mind is always so focused on that. Unless and until we tame the mind, unless and until we train the mind is ever going to go into that state of inertia. Like the swing will always try to be in the middle. But if you want to make use of this swing, we need to push it either way so that it keeps swinging. Similarly, we need to push the mind out of that state of inertia. And that state of inertia is what we refer to as tamas. And what we need to do is to bring in some, kick in some, or push in some energy and make it at least rajasic in nature, wherein it gets into activity, and through our spiritual practice, transform that energy, that rajasic energy, into sattvic energy, the rajasic energy to sattvic energy, to make that activity into a meaningful activity, something that is filled with wisdom. So, why is the mind always focused on our own specific agenda? This is the very answer. The whole creation is created such that everything goes into the state of rest or inertia. And in our case, in the case of the mind thinks the state of inertia, state of rest is when, state of least agitation is when my own desires are satisfied. That's why it is so focused on that. That's the highest priority for the mind. And it is our responsibility through our spiritual practices, we need to get it out of that state of inertia. I hope I have addressed your question, and I hope it makes sense of what I discussed. Okay, so we'll move on to the 15th and the 16th verse today. We'll discuss both the verses first together, because both these verses are focused on the topic of desires. Again, it's kind of related to the question or the points that we discussed as part of the question that you put forth. So the 15th verse goes as Angam Galitam Palitam Mundam Dahana Dashana Vihinam Jatam Tundam Vruddho Yati Grihitva Dandam Tadapina Munchati Asha Pindam. The 16th verse is Agre Vahni Prishthe Bhanu Ratrau Chubuka Samarpita Janu Karatala Bhikshastarutala Vasa Tadapina Munchati Asha Pasha. So both the verses end with Tadapina Munchati Asha. The first one is Asha Pindam, second one is Asha Pasha. So let's first discuss the 15th verse. Focus on the pronunciation first. Please respond twice after I pronounce each of the words. Angam. angam, angam. Gailitam, gailitam, gailitam. Palitam, palitam, palitam. Mundam. The N has a dot below. The D also has a dot below. So for both of them, roll your tongue up. Nda, nda. Mundam, mundam, mundam. Dashayana. S with the mark on the top. So flat tongue. Dashayana, dashayana, dashayana. Vihinam, vihinam, vihinam. The first I doesn't have a bar. The second I has a bar. So it is vihinam. If both the I's had a bar, it would be vihinam. If none of the I's had a bar, it would be vihinam. In this case, it is vihinam. Jatam, jatam, jatam. Tundam, tundam, tundam. The last word of every line, the N and the D have a dot below. So rolling your tongue up. Vriddho. It is DDHO. DH is dha. DDH is dha. So had it been just VRDHO, it would be vridho. Because it is DDHO, it is vriddho. Please respond twice. Vriddho. Vriddho. Yati. 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 Grihitva. 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 The I has a bar over it. So grihitva. Dandam. 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 The N and the D have dots below. Tadapi. 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 Na. 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 Munchati. 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 Asha. 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 S with the bar on the top, the mark on the top. So flat tongue. Sha. Asha. Pindam. N and D with the dots below. Pindam. 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 Angam. Galitam. Palitam. Mundam. Dashana vihinam. Jatam. Tundam. Vriddho yati. Grihitva dandam. Tadapina munchati asha pindam. So let's chant it in tune, sing it in tune. We'll do it twice. The first time, if you're familiar, please join me. Else, let's chant it together the second time when I do it. Angam galitam palitam mundam dashana vihinam jatam tundam vriddho yati grihitva dandam tadapina munchati asha pindam. Together once more. Angam galitam palitam mundam dashana vihinam jatam tundam vriddho yati grihitva dandam tadapi namunchati asha pindam. Let's look into the meaning. It goes as angam. Angam, the body. Anga, the body. Angam, with respect to the body. Galitam. Galitam, the deterioration, the depreciation, the body becoming frail, So Angam Galitam. Palitam Mundam. Palitam, to the deterioration, or in this context, the specific meaning is turning gray. What is turning gray? Mundam, the head, is turning gray, referring to the hair turning gray. So the body is becoming frail, head or the hair is turning gray. Dashana vihinam, dashana, teeth, vihinam, sans, so without the teeth. Jatam, tundam, jatam, becomes, going towards. Tundam, what? The mouth. The mouth is becoming toothless. The body is becoming frail, the hair is growing gray, the mouth is being rendered toothless. Vriddha, vriddha, the old person, the old man or old woman. Yati. Vriddha specifically is in masculine form, but referring to an old person as a generic message. Yati, goes or moves around. Grihitva, holding. Holding what? Dandam, holding a stick. So the old person becomes helpless, is no more able to walk on his own or her own, needs a stick to walk. So basically, it's explaining the state of helplessness that we get into. We become frail, the hair grows gray, we have no more teeth, and we need a stick to walk around, but still, tadapi, still, na munchati, na, not munchati, leaves, still doesn't leave. What doesn't leave? Asha pindam, the bundle, pindam, the heap, or what do you call for it? A roll, a ball, or in this case, let us translate it as heap. The heap of asha, the heap of desires, still don't go away. Everything is becoming frail, but desires are still going very strong within us, is what this verse is pointing out. Let's also discuss the 16th verse and then discuss the whole idea together. The 16th verse goes as Agre vahni prushthe bhanu ratrau chubuka samarpita janu karatala bhikshas tarutala vasa tadapina munchati asha pasha. So again, word by word, let's look into the meaning. Agre, agre, agre. Vahni, Vahni, right? Vahni, 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 Vahni. Prushthe, Prushthe, T with the dot below, so rolling your tongue up, ta, and then there is a H, so it is tha. Prushthe, Prushthe, Prushthe. Bhanu, BH, Bha, Bhanu, Bhanu, Bhanu. Ratrau, Ratrau, Ratrau. Chubuka, Chubuka, Chubuka. Samarpita, Samarpita, Samarpita. Janu, Janu, Janu. Karatala, Karatala, Karatala. Bhiksha, Bhiksha, Bhiksha. BH, so Bha. And then KSH with the dot, S with the dot below. So Sha, Bhiksha. So Karatala Bhiksha, Karatala Bhiksha, Karatala Bhiksha. Tairu Tala, Tairu Tala, Tairu Tala. Vasa, Vasa, Vasa. Tadapi, 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 na, 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 munchati, 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 asha, 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 pasha, pasha, pasha. So the verse is Agre Vahni Prishthe Bhanu Ratrau Chubuka Samarpita Janu Karatala Bhiksha Tarutala Vasa Tadapina Munchati Asha Pasha. So let's chant it in tune or sing it in tune. If you're familiar, again, join me the first time, else join me the second time. Agre Vahni Prishthe Bhanu Ratrau Chubuka Samarpita Janu Karatala Bhiksha Tarutala Vasa Tadapina Munchati Asha Pasha. So because it is the third line, it is Bhiksha Tarutala Vasa. Both of them, when they come together, it would become Bhikshas Taru. There is a S that gets introduced there. So Bhikshas Tarutala Vasa. Let's chant it together. Agre Vahni Prishthe Bhanu Ratrau Chubuka Samarpita Janu Karatala Bhikshas Tarutala Vasa Tadapina Munchati Asha Pasha. So what does the verse say? Agre Vahni. Agre, in front of me or in front. Vahni, fire. So in front is the fire. Prishthe, in the back. Bhanu, the sun. So in the front is the fire, in the back is the sun. Ratrau, in or at night. Chubuka. Chubuka referring to the knees that we have. Samarpita, to lean on. Samarpita basically literally translates to be dedicated. So in this case it is to lean on, to depend on. What? Chubuka Samarpita Janu. The cheeks or the chin that we have is touching or is rested on the knees. The chin is resting on the knees. So basically, what does this verse say? In front is the fire. The fire is giving us heat, assuming it's a cold night. It's a difficult night. The sun is in the back, basically meaning the sun is setting. When the sun sets, when difficult time comes, it is cold and we have just minimal thing in front of us, just a small fire in front of us that is keeping us hot, that is keeping us warm. Ratrau Chubuka Samarpita Jan. When at night, when sun sets, all we have is to just cuddle on to our own self. We are holding our knees, we are curling up with the chin touching the knees. We are trying to maintain the heat that the body produces. Karatala Bhiksha. We are holding our palms. Karatala, the palms. Bhiksha, the palms in form of a bowl, like we are seeking alms. Tarutala, taru, tree. Tarutala, the base of the tree. Vasa, our living. Our life is beneath a tree. So we have no house. We live under a tree. We seek alms. So for even basic necessities, we need help. We even for heat, we just have a small piece of one small fire in front of us, and we 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 curl up so as to maintain the heat in the body. In spite of all these difficult times, tadapi, in spite of that, na munchati, doesn't leave. What doesn't leave? Asha pasha. Pasha, a rope. So the string of asha, the string of desires still don't leave us. We are in this state, a dire state. In spite of being in a dire state, the desires that we have just don't seem to get extinguished. Don't show any sign of leaving. So the 15th and the 16th verse, to summarize the points that we discussed, the 15th verse is about how physically we grow old. We become frail, the hair becomes gray, the mouth is rendered toothless, and we even to move around we need a stick or a walker. We are so dependent. In spite of all this, what keeps going strong in us? Not the abilities, rather the desires. In spite of all these, the desires just keep going strong. So it's a reminder to us, don't carry the burden of the desires. The second verse is also about desires. It says, though life gives us tough teachings, wherein we have to bear difficulties, we have to face the cold with minimal comfort, like a small fire in front of us, or we have to curl up so as to maintain the heat in the body, and we just have minimum things in terms of food and accommodation. In spite of all these minimalistic or the minimal availability that we have, our desires are still skyrocketing. They are still up there. We don't let go of our desires. So the point here is, even when we could have more important priorities that we could set, we just tend to set our desires to be higher in priority. That's the point that both these verses are trying to make us understand. The desires are so strong that whatever be the situation, be it our weakness or be it the difficulties that we are in, desires are always strong. We are just never ready to let go of desires. It's like the story of, I think we had discussed this during Bhagavad Gita discussion, about this woman who would very regularly come to the temple, and she always seemed very devout. She would come to the altar and then just call out to the divine, telling, "Oh God, I have everything in my life. You have given me everything. I am so satisfied that this very moment you call me, I'll just come, walk up to you. I'm just ready to let go of everything in this life. I'm ready to just let go of this life. I'm ready to just walk into you." And every day she used to come and pray aloud like that. And that kind of intrigued the priest in the temple. He was like, wow, look at her devotion. She's so devoted. She's ready to just let go of everything, ready to let go of her life and just walk into the divine. That should be quite a bit of devotion, quite a bit of dedication. And he thinks, why don't I test it? So the next day when she comes, the next time when she comes to the temple, he hides himself behind the altar. And then she again goes into the same saga. Oh God, I have everything. You have made me happy. I'm so content. Just call out to me and I'm just ready to walk into you. And what does the priest do? From behind the altar, he says, my dear daughter, it's time for you to come. Just walk up to me. Just come into me. And you're done with this life. Come, just walk. And what does the daughter do? Does she walk towards the altar? No. That very moment, she just runs away, telling, oh my God, I just put some rice on the stove to cook. I'll just quickly take care of that, turn off the stove and then come. And did she come back? No, she never came back. That's how desires are. We think I'm very satisfied, we think I'm very content. But if we really dig deep within, we have deeply rooted desires which just won't let go of us. Even when the divine says, just come, you'll be liberated, just come to me, we just cannot. That's what happens every day in our life. We hear Amma telling us, reminding us again and again, just let go of all this and you'll be supremely happy, supremely joyful. But because of the deep rooted desires, all these teachings from Amma, from the scriptures, they just get filtered out in such a way that they get molded the way we want to interpret them. Our desires, the roots of our desires are so strong that it just cannot happen. So our desires, they stand on the way of our spiritual growth. That's the biggest hindrance. I remember a few years ago, about 8 or 9 years ago, I decided that once every week, a day every week, I'm just going to take the vow of silence and I'm going to fast. I used to fast regularly for many years on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I would begin from the previous night until 6 p.m. on that day. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays until 6 p.m., I'll try to forego water and food, whatever be the intake, just completely fast that day, not even water. So that's how I used to be. And then eventually Amma said, because I had health issues, etc., Amma said, no, you should not fast. You're not capable of doing that. Any case, so I decided at least once a week I'm going to do that. I'm just completely going to lock myself up in the room. No food, no water, no talking. Once a week, just do that. And I thought, why not? It's going to be quite easy. Let me just do that. And then I lock myself up in the room. After an hour or so, the stomach, because I have health issues, also acidity, and Amma told me because of the acidity, don't fast. So that thought comes in. And then I decide, why don't I just have some water in the room so that in case I feel acidic, I can drink water. So I get a pitcher or a bottle of water and keep it in the room. Now I have health issues, right? So acidity is not just one issue. I also have throat issues. You have seen me cough every now and then, my voice breaking now and then. And even during the satsang in Amritapuri, I was mentioning about all these complications I have had, different forms of complications I have had with my throat. So now I can't just have normal water. The water needs to be heated. But I don't have a flask, so I should rather have a water kettle in the room. So now I just not have a water bottle, I also have water kettle. And slowly, the next week, it became water bottle, water kettle, and some fruits. Now when you have fruits, you definitely need to have a knife. And you need to have some bowls. You need to have some plates. At least one bowl and one plate. And slowly I saw that third or fourth week into it, I started having a small kitchenette in my room every time I was trying to do this. And when I think about it, when I contemplated on it, this is actually defeating the purpose. My whole idea was to cut off from all the attachments or cut off from the world, lock yourself up in the room, no speaking, no consuming. But right to the opposite of it, I am now having a small kitchenette in my room, which otherwise is not there in my room. I would go down to the kitchen to get whatever I want. Now, in the name of spiritual practice, I have created a small kitchenette in my room on the day of the fasting, right? So it defeats the purpose. So I decided I'm just not going to do it because it just doesn't work. It's counterproductive. What began all this? Just the thought that I should have some water. Had I not gotten to that, it should have been fine. But because it started with water, moved on to the water bottle, moved on to the water kettle, moved on to the fruits, moved on to the knife, moved on to the plate, and whatever else I started gathering in the room, it just went on and on and on. That's how desires are. It starts with one seed and it just blossoms. It just, you know, grows into a huge tree of desires thereafter. So, desires is what, whether we realize it or not, it creates a hurdle. It is a it is the limiting factor that we have in our spiritual growth. I remember about 15 or 16 years ago, I asked Amma, because I was talking about fasting, I thought I'll mention this too. Not exactly related to the point that we are discussing, but because we are talking about fasting, I asked Amma one day, I went up to Amma and asked her, Amma, can I fast for 41 days? I just have this desire to fast for 41 days. And Amma just started laughing as if I cracked a joke. And that kind of totally diffused the ego that I had. It was like puncturing this big balloon of ego. I was like, Amma, I'm growing spiritually. No one else may have asked you this question. I'm asking you, can I fast for 41 days? And Amma just made a joke out of it. And she started telling everyone, he wants to fast for 41 days. Did you hear? He wants to fast for 41 days. And I don't know what was funny about it. Everyone was laughing. When Amma laughs, everyone laughs. And then Amma told me, rather than fasting for 41 days and falling sick, you eat every day and be helpful to others. Rather than not eating and becoming a burden for others, falling sick, you just eat every day and be helpful for others, or be of use to others. So, this is not exactly related to the point that we discussed, but again, what I was talking about is, in my case, I thought I'll just do this fasting and do penance the 8 or 9 years ago in DC ashram, but it was just counterproductive, because one desire of having water, that just multiplied, and then I just started accumulating things. So desires is what we need to keep under check. Amma says it's so difficult to let go of desires, because even to just exist in this world, we need desires. Desires are the ones that keep us, they are the driving force for us to exist in this world, for us to sustain in this world. So to have desires, the necessary desires, to have the driving force to sustain in this world is fine. When we try to accumulate more and more desires is where the problem is. Amma says there's nothing wrong in wearing a watch. Rather, wear a $10 watch which shows the right time. If you get a $10,000 watch, it is also going to show the same time as a $10 watch. Rather, why can't we just stick to the essential desire? Why unnecessarily accumulate the inessential desire? So Amma says we do need desires. The whole point is to keep them under check. And how do we keep desires under check? I can think, based on what Amma discusses, I can think of two ways of doing it. At least we can try doing this as a spiritual practice, because we are discussing about desires. Let's try to put it into practice, these 2 points. It's very natural, we'll feel desirous. When we have a specific desire, the 2 points that we can think about is, one, am I desiring about something that is impermanent? Because most of our desires are about impermanent things. If it is so, is it meaningful to desire that? Because it is impermanent, I'm not going to have it tomorrow. Or this desire may not even exist tomorrow. Then why desire now? We may not be able to get rid of desires that way. At least the intensity of desires would go down. That's the first point. The second point also about desires, the nature of desire is, it is cyclic, or it is staggering in nature. It is like a chain reaction. Like the example I gave, you have one desire and that builds on to another desire, probably that spans into multiple desires, and that just keeps going on and on and on. So Are we better just being as we are, or do we want to take all these burdens? Is the second point question that we need to ask. The first question, understanding the impermanence. Best example, when we rent a car, say we rent a luxurious car that we probably cannot afford otherwise. We get the best car like a Lexus or BMW that we are renting. We try to make the journey as comfortable as possible, as joyful as possible. For that sake, we get all the accessories we need for the travel. We get snacks, we get drinks, we get gadgets, and we try to make the journey as beautiful as possible. We get pillows and whatever else to make the journey comfortable as possible. But in spite of accumulating all this in this car, whether we realize it or not, there is this thought within us telling, this is not your own car. Once you reach the destination, you have to return this car. And that feeling is always there within us. And because that feeling is there within us, what happens? Our intensity to accumulate more and more and more within the car is always curbed, because we are aware of the impermanence of these desires and the impermanence of the object of desire. The car itself is impermanent. So if we remind ourselves of the impermanent nature of the things that we desire about and the things that we desire, both of them are impermanent, I think we could reduce the intensity of our desires. So the first one, always remind ourselves of the impermanent nature of the things and the desires associated with those things. That way, we could keep desire at least a little bit under check. The second one, understand desires always create a chain reaction. It's not about satisfying one desire. Never possible. We can never satisfy just one desire. We have a desire, there will be another desire as an offspring of it, another desire as a resultant of it, another desire, and that we keep going one after the other. So remind ourselves of the trouble or the workload that we are accumulating. Remind ourselves of that. At least that way, it will help us to pull back a little bit. It's like an analogy we can draw is like having, say we want to have pizza, and we say, I want pizza, and someone is ready to just hand a slice of pizza to us. We will keep desiring that pizza, that slice of pizza, that way, if someone is ready to give it to us. But say we desire pizza, and then we are told, yes, you can have pizza, but for that, you need to first go down to the car, heat up the car, and because it's winter, all the windows and the windshield are all covered with ice. You need to defrost, and then you need to get the snow off the top of the car and the hood of the car, and then you need to clear the driveway and then drive to the pizza store and then get the pizza from there, come back, heat up the pizza and then eat it. Our desire of having the pizza, we'll say, I think I'll skip the pizza. I don't want pizza anymore, right? When we know there is going to be a chain reaction, when we know there is going to be there are going to be steps of things that we need to do so as to achieve that desire, automatically our intensity of that desire is going to go down. And for that sake, every desire is like this. Every desire is like getting the pizza from the store when it is like intense winter time. It is going to be step by step, a lot of steps that we need to satisfy so as to get the desire overall satisfied. So if we remind ourselves that any desire that I'm trying to satisfy is not one step, it is multiple steps, automatically we are going to step back and say, I think I'll think twice before getting to that. So because we're talking about desire, two ways to keep desire under check is one, to remind ourselves my desires are impermanent and the things I'm associating my desires with may also be impermanent. Let me first assess that. The moment we assess that, we are going to feel less desirous. Two, Every desire is not single step, one step desire, or satisfying a desire is never one step approach. It's going to be multiple step approach. If it is multiple step approach, do I want to do it? Is the question we ask ourselves again. And invariably, our intensity is going to go down, or our inclination towards that desire is going to go down. So let's try to at least use this or have this as a takeaway from today's discussion of how to handle desires. If we can reduce the intensity of our desires with these two questions, hopefully we can make life much more meaningful. There's a passage from Awakened Children, Volume 1, page 19. Amma says, desire is the cause of sorrow. The happiness that we get from worldly objects is only an infinitesimal fraction of the bliss that we get from within. The result will always be sorrow when we think that we are this body. This is only a rented body. We will be asked to go out sometime. Then we must go out. When we are asked to go out, we must go out. Before that, that which is eternal should be gained while residing in this body. If we have a house of our own, we can happily move out of the house when we are asked to vacate a rented one. Then we can live in the eternal house of God. So we need to understand the impermanence, the impermanent nature of our desires and the objects that we associate our desires with. Rather, create a permanent object, which is the supreme truth, and which is not from outside. It has to be from within us. Try to understand that, and that would help us reduce our desires, is what Amma is mentioning. So let us try to exercise this every time. The next time we have a desire that crops up, 2 points, 2 questions that we ask. Is it permanent in nature? 2, is it just one step, or is it going to be trouble? Is it going to be a lot of effort? Multiple steps to satisfy this desire. Hopefully that will help us curb our desires. So we'll conclude the discussion here. Both these verses are pointing out to whatever be the situation in life, difficult situation or failing situation, our desires keep going. So we need to address that, is what both these verses are reminding us. So it is 8:24. So we have 6 more minutes. Probably we can just chant all the 16 verses and conclude. Probably we'll go past 8:30. In case you would want to leave, you have something else, please feel free to do so. We'll quickly chant these 16 verses that we have discussed till now and then conclude. So let's do it together. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhaja Mudhamate, Samprapte Sannihite Kale, Nahi Nahi Rakshate Dukran Karane. Mudha Jahihi Dhanagama Trishna, Kuru Satbuddhim Manasi Vitrishna, Yallabhase Nija Karmopatam, Vittam Tena Vinodaya Chittam, Naristana Bhara Nabhidesham, Drishtva Maga Mohavesham, Etan Mamsa Vasadi Vikaram, मनसि विचिन्तय वारं वारं नलिनीदलगतजलमतितरलं तद्वज्जीवितम् अतिशयचपलं विद्धि व्याध्यभिमानग्रस्तम् लोकं शोकहतं च समस्तं यावत् वित्तोपार्जनसक्तः तावन्निज परिवारो रक्तः पश्चाज्जीवति जर्जरदेहे वार्ता कोऽपि न पृच्छति गेहे यावत् पवनो निवसति देहे तावत् पृच्छति कुशलं गेहे गतवति वायौ देहापाये भार्या बिभ्यति तस्मिन् काये बालस्तावत् क्रीडासक्तः तरुणस्तावत् तरुणीसक्तः वृद्धस्तावत् चिन्तासक्तः परमे ब्रह्मणि कोऽपि न सक्तः काते कान्ता कस्ते पुत्रः संसारोऽयम् अतीव विचित्रः कस्य त्वं कः कुत आयातः तत्त्वं चिन्तय तद् इह भ्रातः सत्सङ्गत्वे निस्सङ्गत्वं निस्सङ्गत्वे निर्मोहत्वं निर्मोहत्वे निश्चलतत्वं निश्चलतत्वे जीवन्मुक्तिः वयसि गते कः कामविकारः शुष्के नीरे कः कासारः क्षीणे वित्ते कः परिवारः ज्ञाते तत्त्वे कः संसारः मा कुरु धनजन यौवनगर्वं हरति निमेषात् कालः सर्वं मायामयमिदम् अखिलं हित्वा ब्रह्मपदं त्वं प्रविश विदित्वा दीनयामिन्यौ सायं प्रातः शिशिरवसन्तौ पुनरायातः कालः क्रीडति गच्छत्यायुः तदपि न मुञ्चति आशावायुः काते कान्ता धनगतचिन्ता वातुल किं तव नास्ति नियन्ता त्रिजगति सज्जन सङ्गतिरेका भवति भवार्णव तरणे नौका जटिलो मुण्डि लुञ्चितकेशः काषायाम्बर बहुकृतवेषः पश्यन्नपि च न पश्यति मूढः हृदयनिमित्तं बहुकृतवेष उदरनिमित्तं बहुकृतवेषः अङ्गं गलितं पलितं मुण्डं दशनविहीनं जातं तुण्डं वृद्धो याति गृहीत्वा दण्डं तदपि न मुञ्चति आशापिण्डम् अग्रे वह्निः पृष्ठे भानुः रात्रौ चुबुकसमर्पितजानुः करतलभिक्षः तरुतलवासः तदपि न मुञ्चति आशापाशः. So let us conclude, sincerely praying to the Almighty that every being in the creation is happy, content and peaceful. Let us chant the Shanti mantra together 3 times. Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namah. Hari Om.